right around the time, I believe, that things began to take a turn for the worse. If we could punch that video up, it'll give you a sense of exactly what was going on there as the protesters really sort of escalated what they were doing, taking it to another level. This is actually footage that was shot from inside CNN Center. You could see the police there lined up as the protesters and these looters are throwing bricks and concrete and skateboards and whatever else they can get their hands on, throwing them at the windows there that lead in to CNN Center. Of course, this is CNN Center, so identifiable not just here in Atlanta but all over the world. I mean, that is just incredible as we take a look at the danger that these police officers came under tonight as protesters threw some kind of incendiary device, a firecracker of some sort, directly in the direction of those police officers. Some just dramatic footage shot from inside CNN Center as police officers tried to protect that building, a building that has sustained a lot of damage. We should mention that the journalists who work there are not down on the ground floor, but instead they're up a little higher. And it's our understanding that no one from CNN has been injured, but that building has really been hit pretty hard.
We saw powerful images where in the foyer of CNN where the disturbers of sorts broke those windows through. Police officers had their weapons drawn. They were absolutely not allowing a single person to walk inside that building. They were able to successfully keep them from doing to CNN's building what we saw happen to the restaurants. We saw
McCormick and
Schmidt,
Ruth's
Chris were all not only damaged but loitered. And when all of this is over and the sun rises and we start to assess the damage, besides the physical part of the buildings that are destroyed, we are in the midst of a pandemic. And many of these businesses, the Hall of Fame, all of them, the College Hall of Fame, all shut down because of COVID-19.
They had to.
And many of these businesses are struggling to not only reopen, but stay open to employ individuals from Atlanta and Georgia who work there.
There's a protester being in custody, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so now we're not only talking about the rebuilding and the reconstruction of buildings, but will they even come back? Not only because Atlanta will rebuild from this, sure, and the mayor is certain of that, but there is an even greater problem with the economy, COVID-19, all of this happening at a time where businesses are struggling to survive, and these loiters and these disturbers have not only destroyed their property, but possibly the potential to even reopen in that area that was having a revival of sorts and drawing many tourists to that area, and which was all helping the economy of Atlanta. This has been a black stain, an ugly black eye. We had the mayor in tears saying, "Go home," a message clearly that a lot of these individuals still are not taking heed to. Bernice King, who is the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she spoke with the mayor, and she was so eloquently said that riots are the language of the unheard. She understands why the protesters were protesting. It was peaceful in the beginning, but it took an ugly turn, and she added that in order to deal with systemic racism and white supremacy, she says the only way to successfully overcome that is through non-violent means. However, that message has gone unheard tonight. And if you were fighting, you were one of those protesters that came out and you were fighting for the injustice that you saw with George Floyd, as the mayor says, that message has been murked. It is very difficult to see that when you are burning down your own city. Rapper T.I. said that, Atlanta is like Wakanda. You have to protect it. It's all we have. Killer Mike said, if you lose Atlanta, what else do we have? And it's just tearful and just heartbreaking. We heard from our reporter, Haley Mason, almost broke down in tears. She's a native. This is the city that she has lived in, grown in, and made a commitment, went away got a job and was able to come back to Atlanta. And this story to cover is gut-wrenching. There are fires still at Centennial Park. There are employees that were in the Waffle House where loiters were damaging property outside the restaurant. I cannot imagine the fear they have right now that they may try to breach the Waffle House. This has gone beyond the message of promoting peaceful and also justice for the narrative that we've seen so many times where African Americans are just suffer great miscarriages of justice. This here is another miscarriage of justice. This was intended to be a peaceful protest. It started with prayer. It started with, it was a rainbow of all colors, people of all backgrounds, colors, you name it. They were there walking together hand in hand to fight for justice and equality. But what we've seen here is mimicking what is happening across the country, an ugly undercurrent of violence here in Georgia, in New York City, in Dallas, Texas, in Kentucky, in Denver, Colorado, in Los Angeles, and where the city where this really originated because of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
You know, it really is sort of a perfect storm of events, Sean, if you think about it. You know, the country cooped up at home, everybody, you know, in a very stressful situation with the economy. We have record levels of unemployment, millions upon millions of Americans filing for unemployment claims week after week. This is a country that is in pain, and these are people that are hurting. And then you throw on top of it the brutal death, murder of a black man in Minnesota, clearly on video with a police officer, his knee in the man's neck as you hear him crying for help, crying for his mother, saying that he couldn't breathe. And that just seems to have been sort of the straw that broke the camel's proverbial back. People just couldn't take it anymore.
And a lot of people are looking for leadership from our nation, from President Trump. I've been monitoring his Twitter feed because that's typically how he likes to communicate. And in the last 10, his last tweet addressing the situation concerning the riots across the country is he tweeted an hour ago, "Time for Change 2020." And it was, he used that to repost a tweet from a group called Former Democrats for Trump, and saying the change for Minneapolis was possibly because it has an all Democratic governor, Secretary of State, everyone who's in political office there, top tier, are Democrats. And he's basically, his response to this has been just time for change 2020.
And there are a lot of people that will agree with that, but not for the reasons that he might hope.
Not for the reasons that he hoped.
People that would agree that it's time for change at the very top, and who will most likely go to the polls this coming November and pick Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump for a second term, because they have lost faith in this administration and its ability to manage some of the sensitivities when it comes to race and policing and inequality that so many people in this country are having to deal with. You know, before the pandemic, we heard from President Trump over and over again talking about all that he had done for the black community. When he was running for office back in 2016, he told African Americans, "What have you got to lose? Give me your support, give me your vote. What have you got to lose?" Well, I think that a lot of members of that community are looking at these events that have unfolded and they're saying, well, actually, Mr. President, we have a lot to lose. And so we will see how all of that plays out. Obviously, this is not President Trump's fault. The people that caused this destruction tonight they did this on their own, and as far as I'm concerned, there is no excuse for that. But there is an awful lot of tension in this country that is not going to go away anytime soon.
Well, Governor Brian Kemp, he has been very vocal here in Georgia as his leadership, along with the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. But if you're just joining us now, at the request of the mayor, Brian Kemp, our governor, in consultation with public safety and emergency preparedness officials, tweeted out that he has issued a state of emergency for Fulton County to activate as many as 500 National Guardsmen to protect people and property in Atlanta. Yasmina Alston, you have been showing us some of the just horrific damage in downtown Atlanta that looters and protesters just destroyed multiple businesses in that area. Give us a scope of just how many you have seen that you can count that have some serious rebuilding to do. And one of them I can see is McCormick and how do you say that?
Schmick's,
I never go there. Yeah,
it's
a kind of fancy restaurant, but it's a steak place, and they're suffering some serious damage. They were loitered, and it's just horrible. So let's go to Yasmina. Yasmina, are you there? Can you give us some perspective of just how many businesses that you saw that have suffered significant property damage?
Yeah, well, Sean, what a night in Atlanta. I mean, now we're really looking at the calm after the storm from what we saw earlier. Here behind me is the Hall of Fame. This is one of those businesses that has just been completely destroyed tonight. If you look here, you can see all of the glass has been shattered in using bricks and rocks down here on the ground. I'm not even sure where some of this came from. Everything from inside has been thrown over. A lot of that ended up right outside of the Hall of Fame. It's in the street and it's on the sidewalks. You can even still hear some of that glass from the windows and from the doors still falling down. I mean, just an unreal scene out here. And then if we go across the street, Steve, we can see the Starbucks also was destroyed and the windows were punched out over there, were thrown out, most likely using bricks like what we saw over here. But earlier, I mean, the streets were filled with people who were upset, people who were angry. We saw the cars that were on fire. Atlanta police still out here now, but I mean, there's a lot of rebuilding and a lot of cleanup that's going to have to be done here in downtown Atlanta.
Yasmina, I can see that from your vantage point. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there were two fires that were at Centennial Park. Do you see plumes of smoke still in that direction, or were they able to get that out?
Sean, yeah, that happened right over here. Those cars, I don't know if can we zoom in that far, Steve? Yeah, you can see those cars that were set on fire earlier, but the Atlanta Fire Department did come and those fires are out now. And what you're looking at, that's what's left from those cars.
Well, Yasmina, we appreciate your reporting. You've done a great job. Stay safe out there. I am monitoring Twitter, and these are, I would say unverified, but they have video. And I am watching disturbing images of, we had mentioned earlier that there was loitering outside of the Waffle House that's right across the street from the Ferris wheel.
The Ferris wheel, exactly.
And when we were last watching that scene, there were people damaging that bus stop there. And the concern was, you could see the lights were on in the Waffle House, and we've learned from the reporter on the scene that there were employees inside who had locked the doors. Clearly, I am sure they were scared. Well, I'm now seeing images that the windows have been smashed at that Waffle House. So there has been another breach of yet another business by these protesters who the mayor has asked to just go home, because you're not, as she says, protests have purpose, and destroying businesses in your own community has zero purpose.
Let me read to everybody an update that we've just gotten from the Atlanta Police Department and Sergeant John Chafee, who is updating on information regarding the protest, not only in the downtown area near Centennial Olympic Park and Marietta Street, but also up in Buckhead at Peachtree and Lenox Road, that intersection where the mall is. And this is according to Atlanta PD. Protesters continue to clash with police, damage and loot businesses, and light fires in the area of Centennial Park Drive and Marietta Street. We've made additional arrests and have had at least one more officer injured in this area, and I believe that brings the total number, Sean, to 4. Protesters have also gathered in the area of Peachtree Road and Lenox Road and have begun looting and damaging businesses in the area. There have been multiple instances of shots being fired in close proximity to our officers, and shots were fired at an officer in a patrol vehicle on Peachtree Road at Lenox Road. So again, this is violence just taken to an entirely different level. Shots fired at a patrol vehicle on Peachtree and Lenox up in Buckhead. And we had been warned that some of the protesters were on social media communicating with each other, saying, hey, now that we've been forced out of downtown, let's make our way up a little bit and go into the Buckhead area, to the Lenox Mall area, and cause some problems there. And so police did position themselves, except that it seems as though the looters, the vandals, were able to go ahead and do some damage anyway, including firing at an officer in a patrol vehicle.
This is going to not only make headlines across the country, it is making international headlines. Even the AJC, we have the front page of their cover. It is a sobering reminder of the very dark day that we have had in Atlanta. If we could pull that up and show you that real quickly. As we try to pull that up, I just see a tweet that came from Atlanta Fire Rescue within the last minute. They report that they've been responding to multiple vehicle fires and reports of building fires now throughout downtown and also now in the Buckhead area. Mutual aid has been requested from neighboring jurisdictions. So those jurisdictions that will assist with fires and large crowds that are congregating in Buckhead include Johns Creek, Cobb County Fire, Smyrna Fire, and we're going to continue to follow that. But then look at this front page cover. Peaceful, then violent. We're better than this as a city, Mayor Bottoms has pled with protesters. It is heart-wrenching. The mayor in tears. And here's why she was in tears. This is not fighting for justice for what was originally supposed to be for George Floyd. This had become, it started out with prayer, a peaceful protest, and then somehow it just grew into an unruly crowd that began to target police, target facilities and buildings and businesses in Atlanta. We have now seen multiple structures on fire, and just using whatever they could, skateboards, bricks, their feet, to destroy government cars, police cars that are meant to protect and serve. Look at this building here as they take bricks and stones from, I'm assuming they carried this into to the CNN Center, because there's certainly not loose stones outside of that facility, and repeatedly throw it over and over and over again until the windows were breached. They broke through the glass. But you worked at CNN. You said that they have a police department within that facility in the basement, and it was a starking view to see police actually with their weapons armed. They were successful in getting those looters from breaking into CNN. But the businesses that surrounded CNN have seen significant damage.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people go to visit. You could take a tour of CNN. It is really open. That first floor area, that street level area, is open to the public. It's really kind of a food court there with a lot of different restaurants, and people will go and even if they're not doing the CNN tour, they'll pop in there just to get a little air conditioning, maybe get a cup of coffee or get a bite to eat. But of course, with the violence that was taking place in the area, really right out in front of CNN Center, the police locking those doors to try to keep the protesters and the looters out. So that's why you saw them throwing those bricks and pieces of concrete to try to get themselves inside of that building. And thankfully, as far as we know, the police doing an amazing job of keeping them out, even though they themselves came under fire while trying to do so. We have some video that we'll get and show you again of someone tossing a firecracker into a crowd of police officers who were trying to protect the CNN building. You know, and it is kind of surreal. Now we look at this scene along Centennial Olympic Park. You see people walking around with a backpack, seemingly normal. I mean, obviously
this is only one of the good pockets. There are, as we just reported, the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, has issued a state of emergency now for Fulton County 500 National Guardsmen have been called in to assist. We've also learned from Fulton County that the Georgia has not only are we under a state of emergency, but Fulton County has sent out a SWAT team. There's an entire law enforcement division that's deployed to Lenox Square. We've also just seen that, just reports now that in Fulton County and in Buckhead, that there have been requests from officers for fire from Johns Creek and surrounding cities because there are buildings now on fire in Buckhead, as well as some structures. At last count, when we spoke to Haley Mason, there were 2 fires at Centennial Park. It doesn't appear from this image that we can tell if there were still plumes of smoke, but at the time, the smoke was still dark, so which is indication that there is still being fueled by the structure being under fire. We're going to monitor that. We're going to get back to those reporters. But we do know that Johns Creek, Cobb County Fire, and Smyrna Fire have been dispatched to the Buckhead area. They are aiding in mutual requests to fight fires in downtown Atlanta and also now in the Buckhead area.
And it's not just Lenox Mall, Sean. We're now getting word. Our colleague Karen Greer is reporting that Phipps Plaza, Simon Malls also being hit hard by looters. This is that whole shopping area in Buckhead that includes Lenox Mall and Phipps Plaza and a number of other shopping areas. And it just seems as though some of the people that were causing all of this damage here downtown earlier this evening have made their way north up to up 400 up into the Buckhead area where they're now doing some damage there as well.
Our Astrid Martinez is now reporting that the National Guard has just pulled up to Lenox Mall. You can see huge trucks and tanker trucks that have arrived on the scene to help assist with the developing situation that is happening in Buckhead. Also, a developing situation outside of the Waffle House that's directly outside of Centennial Park and the big Ferris wheel. There were employees that had locked themselves up into the building out of clear, probably fear. That building has now been breached, and the glass windows have all been broken. Police are now assisting with that situation. It is now 12:37 in the morning, a full almost 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours since this peaceful protest began and has become utterly unruly and violent. We saw a tearful Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in tears, begging protesters, do not destroy your own city. It is not reflective of who we are. And this is the black eye that not only we're going to know about, but it is now international news.
It sure is. It sure is. And, you know, we heard from the mayor when she said that when she saw the death of George Floyd, she responded as a mother would respond, as a parent would respond. It was really an emotional news conference earlier today. We're going to take a listen to a little piece of it right now.
So what I see happening on the streets of Atlanta is not Atlanta. This is not a protest. This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos. A protest has purpose. When Dr. King was assassinated, we didn't do this to our city. So if you love this city that has had a legacy of black mayors and black police chiefs and people who care about this city, where more than 50% of the business owners in Metro Atlanta are minority business owners. If you care about this city, then go home.
I mean, it really is self-defeating. If you think about what these protesters were trying to accomplish, and really very few people would have argued with them at the beginning of this protest. Of course, go out, exercise your First Amendment right to assemble, your freedom of speech, your freedom to protest things you don't like. That's what it is to be an American. Go out and do it. but don't do this.
In fact, the mayor, she went on to say in the press conference, when you burn down the city, you're burning down your community. She added, if you want to change America, register to vote. Show up to the polls on June 9th. That's the change this country needs. She added that you are disgracing our city and the life of George Floyd and any other black man killed in this country unfairly. We are better than this as a city and a country, and we are no longer talking about the murder of an innocent man. The mayor says we're now talking about the burning and destruction of streets in Atlanta. She pled for people to go home. Not only have some not gone home, they have wreaked horrific damage to downtown Atlanta. Now those disruptors have pushed into Buckhead, where we are getting reports of structures on fire in Buckhead. We're also getting reports of multiple businesses and a hotel have been breached and loitered. And this reflects nothing about fighting for equal justice.
We have heard tonight from the police chief, Erica Shields. She has spoken not only to us, to our colleagues out in the field, but she has spoken to the protesters who were there earlier, who were protesting peacefully at the time. Before things turned violent, she waded into the crowd right by CNN Center, and she talked to them. And she said, look, I get it. I understand why you are so upset. I'm appalled. And she used the word appalled. And she talked about things that could be done to help improve the situation when it comes to police and minority communities. She talked about training. She talked about bad cops. And of course, the vast majority of cops are amazing cops. They are public servants that put their lives on the line every single day. But just like in any field, there are bad apples. And she says that it's our job to weed them out. And she talked about police officers getting more engaged with the communities that they serve. And it was remarkable. And for a while, we sat back and we listened and we watched and we thought, this is going to be okay. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. Let's take a listen to the police chief from earlier tonight.
The key is training. The key is weeding out bad cops. Especially when you see a pattern of bad behavior, I think it's getting engaged with the community so that you're getting feedback real time about what your people are doing, because you might think you know, but then there's the side of when you're not watching. Body-worn cameras have been tremendous, because body-worn cameras show us how a person is behaving when other people aren't around.
And that was Police Chief Shields earlier this evening talking to us. And those were the same messages, Sean, that she conveyed to the protesters. When she went out and she talked to them, she spoke to them in a language that they could understand, including using some curse words as well as she talked to the protesters.
In fact, I was sort of taken aback because of her frankness and her humanity. One of the protesters asked Chief Shields, what did she think about the police officer who is now facing murder charges for the death of George Floyd? And she said he was horrible and he was a son of a, B. And you don't expect that type of dialect coming out of the mouth of a chief, but she was human. And I admired her for taking that huge step to show the humanity and to treat those young black men who were protesting peacefully, to give them their dignity, because that is one of the things that they've been fighting for. I'm looking at Astrid Martinez as one of our reporters. She is her Twitter feed, and she is now showing video of looters are inside Phipps Plaza. They are now looting that facility. We've also got reports of multiple businesses outside of Lenox Square. We don't know of any breach of Lenox Square at this point, but the businesses that surround it and are around it have suffered extensive damage and loitering, including a jewelry store, according to our reporter in the field out there. Also, a cell phone store was loitered. But right now, as we speak, there are looters inside of Phipps Plaza. This situation is hardly over.
Now, and look at these live pictures. This is Lenox Square, Peachtree and Lenox, where we're told that someone fired a shot inside at a police officer who was inside a vehicle. That took place tonight. And we're also getting word, Sean, that there's a fire, presumably unrelated to the protests, but there's a fire at Del Frisco's restaurant right near the Lenox Mall, and that fire units are in the area, but that they're not able to get to the fire because of the protesters. And so you think about, the damage that these looters are doing, and then the way that they're actually causing even more damage by preventing some of the first responders from being able to get to those locations where they are most needed. And so, this is just an absolute nightmare for law enforcement, for the fire department, for first responders, to have to deal with this number of people who are really just intent on not protesting peacefully, as they have been encouraged to do, but intent on causing chaos and destruction.
And to give you an idea of the severity of this situation, that Atlanta police officers alone were unable to contain the situation. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, along with Governor Brian Kemp, have issued a state of emergency for Fulton County by the governor, and now 500 Georgia National Guardsmen have been brought into Atlanta and the surrounding area to protect people and the property of Atlanta. The newest information that we have is that the governor has also requested support with the National Guard, and by issuing this state of emergency, hopefully this will be able to continue to get additional resources into this area. And I'm not sure about the financial side, but when there is a state of emergency issued, sometimes there's some type of federal funding that maybe help these businesses recover so they can hopefully rebuild and stay here in Georgia. But it is just to look at all of these police cars and the presence of police. This is not the way this protest was supposed to end, and it's still not over. There are disruptors that are causing chaos in Buckhead now, but still in Atlanta, we've seen scenes where it's eerily quiet, but there's pockets right outside of Centennial Park where there were 2 fires, and the Waffle House has been breached and the windows have been broken there. There are multiple businesses that have suffered enormous amount of damage. And the fear, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, is will these businesses be able to not only fix the damage, but will they be able to reopen? Is it possible? Will they be able to do that? Because there's been such a hit on the economy because of COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, and you hear people lawmakers calling for another stimulus package to help those businesses affected by the pandemic. You hear about the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, where the federal government has been paying small businesses so that those businesses could continue to pay their employees and to stay open. So many different efforts taking place as we try to recover from the pandemic. Our resources stretched so far, almost to the limit as it is, to then have to deal with this on top of everything else. Just like I said, the perfect storm of events, all of these bad things happening all at once.
So right now, let's just recap the latest headlines that we know that is happening at this hour that is urgent. Atlanta Fire has been responding to multiple vehicle fires and reports of building fires throughout downtown Atlanta. Also now reports of fires in the Buckhead area. We have confirmed that there has been a breach into Phipps Plaza. It is being looted right now as we speak. We know that the governor has issued a state of emergency for Fulton County, which has dispatched 500 National Guardsmen to help squash this situation. Fulton County also dispatching SWAT and setting up perimeters outside of Lenox Square to prevent these looters from breaching that facility. It has been a long and terrifying night for those who have tried to avoid this situation and started out with the peaceful protest and saw when it became unruly, went home. It has been disastrous and heart-wrenching for those who live in Atlanta, who are from Atlanta. We've seen the mayor of Atlanta break down nearly in tears, hurt by the damage that she's seen being done to the city that we love. Atlanta will never be the same. Once the sun rises, we'll get a full idea and assessment of all of the damage. I don't think we have a clear idea of it yet because we're humans and we have limited scope of resources of where we can go. We were in some of the hardest hit areas, but the question is outside of Centennial Park, outside of CNN's headquarters, is there even more damage beyond the blocks from there? It has been a difficult night for police. They have shown incredible restraint, even when these protesters began to deface property and beat their cars with skateboards and kick in windows with their feet and burst out the windows and take equipment that's inside the cars. They showed incredible restraint and did not fight back. If there is a glimmer of hope that came out of here, we saw Atlanta Police Department show and exemplify how to protect and serve. That they understand that these are people who are hurting, who are angry, who have had very little ways of venting out their frustration. They've been cooped up in their homes for weeks because of COVID-19. And the state has, gone into phase 2 and Atlanta is reopening. And here was an opportunity to walk together in peace and to fight for equal justice in the judicial system for African American men and Black Lives Matter movement. And this is not reflective of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter fights for equality, for injustices. This is not justice. This is, as the mayor has said, this is chaos, and that protests have purpose, and the purpose was lost the minute cars were set on fire, the minute windows were burst out of businesses' windows, the minute that companies had the products inside their stores looted. And now, what's happened almost 8 hours ago, still continues at 12:51 in the morning. There are fires burning in Buckhead. There's fires still in Atlanta. At last report, the Waffle House in Centennial Park, their windows had just got breached, but there was employees inside there who had locked the doors, afraid. Now they're being accosted. And we have the situation now in Phipps Plaza, where it is being looted. We have the situation, businesses outside of Lenox Square Mall, where they have been looted and buildings on fire. It's far from over.
And this is not a black and white issue or a black versus white issue. Of course, George Floyd was black. The officer who was arrested for his murder today was white. But we have watched as whites and blacks have joined together to protest peacefully earlier in the day. And now we have watched as blacks and whites have joined together to cause chaos and destruction on the streets of Atlanta. And so for anyone who might try to paint this as a black versus white issue, talking about the racial tensions, yes, of course there are racial tensions, but these looters, these vandals, they come in all shapes, sizes, and colors.
And we have seen we have seen every color doing the looting.
We really have. And you take a look at the destruction of police property. You wonder what's going through the minds of these protesters. There's a young woman right there we just saw with a ponytail throwing a brick at the back of a police cruiser. These are people who might otherwise have never raised a hand in anger or in violence ever in their lives, and yet here they are, and there she is. What are they thinking of? What are they hoping to achieve by destroying this police cruiser, by setting cars on fire?
The interesting part in the age of digital media and video and the ability for keyboard warriors on Twitter and Facebook and social media to take screenshots of the close-up pictures of those who have done the looting and identify them. If that happens, are they ready to face the consequences? I think that in the midst of this, I don't think any of that was even considered. And here you go, stones, bricks, portions of concrete, chunks of it that it had to have been brought to CNN because that is not outside their facility of loose type of instruments or
Right, you don't see
you don't see
loose
that,
bricks like
right?
that.
Loose bricks outside of CNN that had to be physically brought in. So they had an intention of doing this. This was premeditated. You had to know that you were not going to use a big heavy piece of concrete and march for justice.
And you also have to wonder how many of these looters are actually Atlantans, or did they come from elsewhere? Did they find out, did they see on social media that there were going to be protests in Atlanta, and did they decide to come and try to stir up trouble? And we have seen this in the past. I have covered these stories over the years, and I know you have too, Sean. After when tensions sort of boil over, and there are protests, and I remember on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, where the police said that the majority of people who had come in and done such damage to that city, that they were not locals. They were people that came from elsewhere. They were just looking to make trouble, and they knew where to find it, and they knew how to contribute to it.
And I think that's a fair assumption, Rick, because within the last couple of weeks, we had a growing problem in Atlanta with drag racing on city streets. And police reported then that many of those individuals that were coming and doing the drag racing in Atlanta were people from other states because their state was shut down. We're open for business, and they were coming here and drag racing on our roads. It's a valid concern. There are going to be so many questions for Police Chief Erica Shields and the mayor of Atlanta tomorrow and for the coming weeks. We saw pockets of where where the looting had started, and our reporters on the field said there was not a police officer anywhere around it, nothing at all. And there were fires at Centennial Park, and we had reporters who say there's not a firefighter in sight, at least in the circumference from what I can see from their vantage point. The philosophy of the police department and the strategy that they took on how to deal with the looters and with the protesters that turned violent, the question will be, what was the strategy, and did you implement it, and did you see it as effective? Because we do know that the governor has now called, the mayor asked for assistance from the governor, and the governor, Brian Kemp, put Fulton County under a state of emergency. That allowed him to deploy 500 National Guardsmen to help and assist with this. We know that other agencies were called in, including many county agencies that surround Atlanta came and helped disperse the crowds. Our reporters in the field, Brittany Miller, said that she didn't really see that last fragment of protesters that just were stubborn and would not go home. She didn't really see them become dispersed until all the extra help arrived on the scene. Now we have a growing problem where those looters, presumptively the looters that were in Atlanta, have pushed into Buckhead. And now Buckhead is dealing with a growing problem of not only fires in Atlanta, but fires in Buckhead. Also, multiple businesses have been looted, including Phipps Plaza, including businesses that are outside of Lenox Square. We have video to show you that we captured of multiple individuals approaching Phipps Plaza using some type of rock or stone or some debris to break open those windows. They were able to breach it and went in and looted stores. Police now have set up, they have sent, there's SWAT teams that are out there. There have been, I'm not sure what you call it, but they were outside of Lenox Square where they set up a perimeter for the police department to basically protect Lenox Square. At this point, we don't have any reports of Lenox Square being breached, but Phipps Plaza has been.
There is a store across the street from Lenox Square, an AT&T store that has been breached. We've seen some video of that. We mentioned the news conference earlier tonight, I guess last night now, with Mayor Bottoms and Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., who was there and who spoke so eloquently. She is now tweeting a quote from her father, one of his most famous quotes, that he actually delivered right before his assassination, almost predicting his own assassination. He said, "I might not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." And this is a man who preached nonviolence. This is a man who led a movement and who changed a country on the basis of nonviolence by teaching and encouraging nonviolence. And we have seen that lesson, sadly, not learned tonight by so many who took to the streets to cause such chaos and destruction and upset. And you just think about how everybody, no matter who you are, you have been dealing with difficult times lately. Perhaps you haven't gotten sick, or you don't know anyone who has gotten sick, but you have still been affected by the pandemic. You've still perhaps had your job affected by the pandemic. You have a lot of things to worry about that perhaps you didn't have to worry about only a few short months ago. And now, if you are a business owner, if you are a homeowner, if you live in the city of Atlanta, if you live in the area of Buckhead near Lenox Mall, now you have even more to worry about tonight, even more to be upset about. And
the looters have shown us that they've had very little respect for authority. They have attacked police. At last count, there are a total of how many police officers that are now injured?
Three officially, but we do believe that there may be one or two more who have been injured.
The police officers they had water bottles thrown at them, but some of the more egregious cases have been where they were shot at with BB guns. The officers were basically showed incredible restraint despite how violent some of these protesters were. But now we have new reports that now the looters are attacking journalists, at least our property. One of our CBS 46 cars has been damaged while covering the protests in Buckhead. This situation in Buckhead is, as you can see from this heavy police presence here in this picture, it is still highly active. There have been brought in multiple outlining fire departments, including Johns Creek and Cobb County, who have been brought in with their fire departments to help put out fires that have popped up in Buckhead. But again, I can report that one of our CBS cars has been damaged while our crew has been covering the protests in Buckhead. This has been a dangerous situation for our reporters too. They were there when some of the protesters got pepper sprayed, or tear gassed to disperse the crowds. And if you have ever experienced tear gas, it makes it very difficult to breathe. It will burn your eyes, your chest will burn, and you will run to find clear oxygen wherever you can. Our reporters have had to endure that too. This is a story that is heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. It is far from over. It is now 1 o'clock in the morning, and there are still looters attacking and stealing property from stores in Buckhead. At last count, we saw a business in outside of Centennial Park, the Waffle House. They had just been breached. The damage has been incredible, but our Jamie Kennedy is on the scene in Buckhead. And Jamie, tell us, just give us a scope of what you've been seeing.
You can see behind me here, the looters, the protesters have been up here. They've smashed into the hotel here. This is Hotel Cyan. They've also smashed the jewellery store just next to us. Now, across the road at Lenox Mall, we tried to go there, but they ran us off. They stole our microphone from us. But before that happened, we actually saw them chucking multiple projectiles into the police that are now in front of Lenox Mall, and they are trying to guard it. But it is certainly a chaotic scene down here as well. More so like little groups around the area, not just a whole sort of large group like you saw down near where the CNN building is and such, but just across the road you can probably see all the blue lights and such. And if I just pan over here, you'd probably be able to see the jewellery store there. They've smashed, that's the windows we talked about there. A lot of people down here angry as well, chanting lots of different things to us, throwing lots of different things. They had a number of bins on fire across the road there as well. Now we've gotten multiple reports coming from producers about the different types of projectiles that they have been throwing at police down there, but they are trying to really cause a chaotic scene, and they certainly are making that here. We saw multiple fire engines here. You can see police here just driving over all around, going absolutely nuts. Everyone.
That was Jamie Kennedy from just a couple minutes ago. As we take a look at this live picture now, this is a traffic camera, a stationary camera that is set up at Peachtree and Lenox Road. And not far from this intersection, there was a fire at Del Frisco's Grill. That's right across from Lenox Mall. That fire, we're told, is out. But there are several windows broken and damaged to a lot of the fire trucks that responded to the scene. So firefighters were there. They were picking up their hoses to leave, and all of a sudden they, it seems, came under attack by some of the looters who damaged their fire trucks. And so you just think about what kind of business shenanigans these people were up to tonight, the kind of trouble that they wanted to cause, even going after fire trucks that were trying to put out some of the fires that they themselves set.
There is absolutely no one safe in the line of what these protesters are doing. We have seen very little respect for authority, for police, for journalists, and certainly for structures and buildings. They have looted and stolen and really have put a black eye on a very dark day for the city of Atlanta. The Governor Brian Kemp, has responded by placing Fulton County under a state of emergency. This is allowing 500 National Guardsmen to come in and assist with restoring safety to both the public and to businesses in the area. The situation in Buckhead developed shortly after the police in Atlanta were able to successfully, with the help of other local county governments coming in and adding their resources to ours, to push out these protesters. And the assumption, we were hoping they were going home, because we'd see pockets throughout downtown Atlanta where it became eerily quiet and you could just see all the damage, and you're like, okay, this is, at least it's quieting down. But instead, pockets recongregated and became even more violent and began torching more cars and damaging more property, and then pushed into the Buckhead area, where we are now seeing this heavy police presence, because there are reports of the Target in Buckhead, also Lenox Square. The businesses outside of Lenox Square, as we saw with Jamie's report, have suffered major damage, structural damage, but also they had looting there. And then at Phipps Plaza, it was breached, and looters went in there and just had a field day.
You know, we're getting some reports out of Minnesota that an autopsy has been performed on George Floyd, and it was his death on Monday that sparked these protests. His death at the hands of white police officers, one of them with his knee on Floyd's neck. And you heard him saying in the video that we've all watched, "I can't breathe." Well, now we're hearing from the medical examiner in Minnesota that his death was not due to strangulation or asphyxiation, but rather due to underlying medical conditions. And so that is something, as word begins to sort of trickle out, as that gets reported in the news tonight and tomorrow, that it was not the officers who were responsible for the death of George Floyd, but that, according to the medical examiner, at least it was underlying health conditions. That is going to be another thing that's going to upset people and perhaps lead to more problems tomorrow. There
is deep-seated distrust with the Black community in Minneapolis because of numerous reports, as we saw earlier, where during the press conferences there, where members of the NAACP, the Black Lives Matter movement, stressed that what happened to George Floyd had happened to numerous other African Americans, and not one single thing happened to the police officers who they believe were responsible for their deaths. And that it's very difficult for these protesters, because at least they were saying they were marching for justice for George Floyd. But when you look at the police video and the cell phone video, and you see the knee of that officer on his neck for 8+ minutes, and him screaming, begging for help, yet 3 officers were standing, or not standing, but holding his body down. His knee was into his neck, and despite him begging for breath, no one offered any aid. And then after the emergency services arrived, he was still in handcuffs, and they did nothing until he was taken away with emergency services. So the distrust, and why there is such angst and anger and frustration, and what we've seen manifested not only here in Atlanta but in multiple cities across the country, is that the video shows something that even if he didn't die because of his knee and his neck, they feel that this was an egregious miscarriage of justice, because you are presumed innocent until you're guilty, and he was treated, in their minds, inhumanely.
Yeah, and clearly the U.S. government is expecting the violence in Minneapolis to continue on through the weekend. We are just getting word that the Pentagon has taken what's being described as a rare step of putting military police on alert in case they need to go to Minneapolis. So military police, yet another level of law enforcement, this time from the military, being brought in to try to bring the situation under control in Minneapolis. And you have to hope that they're not needed, but clearly they want to be prepared just in case they are. Again, this just crossing on the Associated Press wire that the Pentagon has taken the rare step of putting military police on alert, perhaps to go to Minneapolis if they are needed there.
It is now 1:11 in the morning, and we have yet to hear from Atlanta Police Department or any other government agency as to when they do think that at some point they will have this situation contained. It is still very active in Buckhead. There are still pockets of activity in Atlanta, and there is serious concerns about the safety. As so that our Governor Brian Kemp, just placed Fulton County under a state of emergency. There are 500 National Guardsmen that have been dispatched to this area to keep the people and the property of Atlanta safe. And you have the situation that is developing in Buckhead, where there was a popular steakhouse that was on fire, looted, and that fire has been put out. But surrounding agencies, Cobb County and Johns Creek, were called in to help Buckhead just to deal with the fires in that area. It is believed that once Atlanta police were able to disperse that last remnant of unruly protesters and to squash some of the hot pockets here, those individuals then went to Buckhead. And Buckhead is now dealing with a situation where there is a heavy police presence outside of Lenox Square Mall. They have been successful to keep them from breaching that area, but the businesses that surround Lenox Square have suffered a heavy toll. We've seen fires like this where multiple car fires are still reported in Atlanta. Police are still trying to get those fires doused. It is scary. If you live in Atlanta, you love this city. The mayor broke down in tears, just utterly disgusted with the behavior of these individuals, choosing an opportunity of a peaceful protest to turn it around and make a very big, ugly black eye for our city. Our city was already, like many across the country, suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses have been struggling. Many have been closed. We just entered phase 2 in Atlanta, where many businesses and restaurants and clubs or have been allowed to reopen to hopefully restore the economy or give life to these businesses that were hanging on a shoestring because there's been no income coming in. And here's the opportunity to reopen. And today, many of those popular restaurants in the Centennial Park area have suffered massive damage. We have seen the College Hall of Fame, which is a huge tourist attraction for our city.
Yep.
Centennial Park has the gift store there destroyed by fire. We have multiple restaurants in the area, Starbucks there, all looted and windows burst out and spray painting, defacing the exterior of the property, and then CNN. They were fortunate enough to have a police department in the basement of their facility, and it could be very well why CNN was not breached. They suffered heavy losses with the exterior of the building, but none of those looters were able to get inside.
This footage that you're seeing right now with those vehicles on fire and those crowds dispersing are not live pictures. This is footage from a couple of hours ago when those crowds were still pretty good numbers in the downtown area near Centennial Olympic Park and CNN. Those crowds have now been dispersed, and unfortunately it seems as though some of them have made their way north to Buckhead. We've told you about the fire at Del Frisco's Grill, and the fire is now out there, although several of the fire trucks that were brought in to put out those flames were damaged by looters. We're also told that tear gas was dispersed near Lenox Square in order to try to control the crowd, and that the National Guard actually arrived at the scene to assist law enforcement with trying to control those crowds. Again, we have been reporting here, and it says at the bottom of your screen that 500 National Guard troops have been deployed to help out with the protection of public and private property in Atlanta as a result of what we're seeing tonight. That fire again is out, but there are some
There's
windows
a new
broken.
one. There is a new one. The Atlanta Fire Rescue now reporting that there is a fire. They're working at 152 Lucky Street. Apparently there's moderate smoke, but they have requested a full alarm. Right now, Cobb County is assisting with trying to get that fire out.
That Lucky Street fire is down in the downtown area, not in Buckhead, not far from Centennial Olympic Park. Lucky Street is. But yeah, I mean, and that these little sort of pockets that we're going to see the police able to disperse the crowds, but you have to imagine that not all of these people who have now gotten themselves all worked up, who may have been drinking alcohol. We heard the mayor talking about how it is not correct, not proper to be running down the street looting and carrying a bottle of liquor, of alcohol in your hand. But you have to figure that alcohol must be playing a part in some of what we're watching tonight. It is just really tragic. And you hope that these protesters have gone home for the night and are done causing trouble, but
They're not.
Of course, they're probably not. You're
They
right.
are not. This is far from over. I have been trying to monitor to see if Governor Kemp or Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has posted any new tweets regarding how they are. I know the mayor is from Atlanta. She's born and bred here. She is passionate about the city she loves. She was almost in tears when she held a press conference. I can't imagine that she's asleep. It's very difficult to fall asleep. This is gut-wrenching. If you just go on Twitter, you just peruse the pages of just those who are in Atlanta, when they see these images of your city on fire, it is heartbreaking. And we're not just seeing these images here in Atlanta. This is an image and a story that is playing out nationwide. There are fires and reports of looting also in other major cities, including Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Kentucky, Denver, Colorado, Ohio. And all of this was in response originally to have a peaceful protest for George Floyd, but it has completely gone into utter chaos. And then We're just getting this from the Associated Press, but soldiers from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and Fort Drum in New York have been ordered to be ready to deploy within 4 hours to Minneapolis if called. So if you think the situation here in Atlanta is bad, it is equally, if not worse, in Minneapolis. This is something that, I've been looking for President Trump to see, our nation's top leader in chief, to see how he is going to console a nation who is hurting, who is, some are hurting, some are angry, some are frustrated, and some are just violent. But the message that we're getting from our president tonight so far, at least on Twitter, is that he just said change 2020.
You mentioned those troops from Fort Bragg and Fort Drum. It's very unusual, we're told, for the Army, for the military to deploy Army military police to an American city. But that is just how bad things have gotten in Minnesota. Of course, the site of the death of George Floyd. The fact that the military has put those soldiers on standby, active duty U.S. military police units on standby in case they need to be deployed, is really just a sign of exactly how bad the situation is in Minnesota, how authorities don't think that it's going to get better anytime soon. We have a weekend ahead of us where people presumably have, if they still have jobs, they have some time off from work in which they could perhaps stir up some trouble. And so it is a story that we're going to have to continue to watch. And if the protests are continuing in Minnesota, will protesters in other parts of the country feel the need to join them in solidarity? Will we once again see protests tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening here in Atlanta?
And that's an interesting point that you make, Rick, because we had reporters ask some of the protesters in the field here in Atlanta today. We reminded them that T.I. and Killer Mike, these millennials, they know who those two individuals are. They are very popular among that crowd. And they looked in the camera and looked at our reporter square in the face and said, no, I am not going home. I don't care that T.I. said go home. I don't care that Killer Mike said go home. And I don't care that the mayor of Atlanta said go home. We're staying out here. And one gave a troubling quote that I probably will not forget. And he said, if we don't have justice, we'll come and protest again tomorrow. That is frightening, considering that we are now under a state of emergency, that we've had to call in the National Guard to try to squash the violence that is happening both in Atlanta and Buckhead. Governor Brian Kemp issuing the state of emergency. He's working in tandem with Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. At least the leadership here in Atlanta and in Georgia are working in tandem, a Democrat and Republican working in tandem to restore peace back into our city. But let's listen to this soundbite from Killer Mike. He said something that was very powerful, and he said, if we lose Atlanta, what else do we have? Let's listen in.
I didn't want to come, and I don't want to be here. I'm the son of an Atlanta City police officer. My cousin is an Atlanta City police officer, and my other cousin, East Point police officer. And I got a lot of love and respect for police officers, down to the original 8 police officers in Atlanta that even after becoming police had to dress in a YMCA because white officers didn't want to get dressed with niggers. And here we are 80 years later. I watched a white officer assassinate a black man, and I know that tore your heart out. And I know it's crippling. And I have nothing positive to say in this moment because I don't want to be here. But I'm responsible to be here because it wasn't just Dr. King and people dressed nicely who marched and protested to progress this city and so many other cities. It was people like my grandmother, people like my aunts and uncles who were members of SCLC and NAACP, and in particular, Reverend James Orange, Mrs. Alice Johnson, and Reverend Love, who we just lost last year. So I'm duty bound to be here to simply say that it is your duty not to burn your own house down for anger with an enemy.
Killer Mike there, and you can hear the emotion in his voice. He talked about being the son of an Atlanta police officer, and you know, it just must break his heart and that of so many others who are born and bred and raised here in the city of Atlanta. I mean, I can't call myself as part of that group. I've only been here for a couple of years, but
But you love the
it
city.
It doesn't take long to fall in love with
It does
Atlanta
not.
and the people of Atlanta. So warm, so welcoming. The Southern hospitality really it grabbed me by the lapels as soon as I got here. And so it is really just heartbreaking to see the city sort of implode on itself, and to see the self-inflicted wounds that so many people are responsible for tonight. People who may have come out in hopes of having a peaceful protest, and yet at the end of the night, that's not what happened. It started off that way. It did not end that way.
It did not. In fact, let's listen to Bernice King. She also spoke with Killer Mike, and she stressed the importance of nonviolent protest. She condemned what has happened here in Atlanta tonight, imploring people, if you want to make real sustainable change, you got to vote.
Good evening, everybody, and I want to thank the mayor for calling us together. This is a tough moment, and if I might take one liberty to just say, I've obviously been in the place of the daughter of George, 6-year-old left without her daddy, who was killed senselessly, as my father was assassinated senselessly. It sent me on a journey of anger. And I fought that demon a long time. And this is a moment where people are feeling a lot of stuff right now and are fed up. And as I stand in this moment and I look at my journey, I have to make an appeal to my brothers and sisters, because I realize that the only way to get constructive change is through nonviolent means. You know, a lot of people have been using my father's words. Sometimes I get a little upset when people do that and co-opt those words and take them out of context. But I realize that he gave his life to this nation. He was a son of this state and of this city, born on the soils of this city, on Auburn Avenue. But he said to us, riots are the language of the unheard. And the part we often miss when people use it is the part about the unheard. This is a time when we all have to listen. We have to listen to the cries that are coming out of the hearts and the souls of my young brothers and sisters and all of the others that are in the streets of America right now and in our city. But if there's anything I can say to them as they cry out to look at these changes, because the changes have to happen. We can't go back to yesterday. We can't keep doing things like we've been doing it in this nation. We've got to deal with systemic racism and white supremacy once and for all. But the only pathway I know to do this is through nonviolent means. It is a proven method. It did not fail my father and them. As many people who think it failed, it did not fail them, because one thing about it is when you really understand it and really practice it, it brings about the results. So right now it's about what is the end goal. The end goal is we want change and we want it now. But change never comes through violence. It is not a solution. Violence, in fact, creates more problems. It is not a solution. Nonviolent way is the way because the means and the ends have to be consistent. We will never get to the end of justice and equity and true peace, which is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice, unless we do it through nonviolent means. And so I'm just speaking from my heart now and saying, I feel you. Trust me, I feel you. I've been close to the edge this time. But I can't go back to all that I felt inside and the rage that was inside that wanted me to destroy people and destroy lives as Martin Luther King's daughter. Because I know that the only way to get what we really want and really get it and not just crumbs is through nonviolence and peace. And so please, let's stay focused in that way. And remember, everybody is not on the same page. There are people who would try to incite a race war in this country. Let's not fall into their hands and into the trap. There's another way. And so in the name of Martin Luther King Jr., from the soils of Atlanta, Georgia, and from the 5-year-old girl who lost her daddy to gun violence senselessly at the hands of law enforcement. Let's do this the peaceful and nonviolent way to deal with the evils and the conditions of our time. But I will say, as he said in his I Have a Dream speech, if we go back to business as usual, we're going to be in trouble. Let's not go back to business as usual. Let's deal with these issues that people are crying out of their soul and their spirit, the conditions that have led to this kind of action. Thank you.
We have yet to see if tomorrow will be business as usual, or the day after that, or the day after that. But I do know what is happening tomorrow, and we have the cover of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's front cover. It is sobering about what this black eye that Atlanta has been doled out with. The cover is says peaceful, then violent. It did start out peaceful. Prayer was at the beginning. All races were together walking, hoping to send the message of equal justice. And then we have the Mayor Bottoms quote saying, "We are a better city than this," with this disturbing and image that will forever be in our minds of the police car torched, on fire, big black plumes of smoke lifted into the air as hundreds of protesters are around it. And this is only just some of the damage that we have seen in Atlanta. But the sad part is that once the police were able to get the protesters squashed and out of the city of Atlanta, they have now pushed into Buckhead. This is new video from Buckhead. It shows the fire departments, including Atlanta's, along with Johns Creek and Cobb County, came in to help assist, put out fires at, I believe this is Phipps Plaza. Phipps Plaza not only had restaurants that were torched, but also there was looting inside of the business. We ever got reports that looters have tried to get into Gucci. Also, there's a hotel that our reporter told us that had suffered significant damage. It's a disturbing scene, and this is far from over. It is almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and police, along with now Fulton County, under a state of emergency, and 500 National Guardsmen being called in to assist, along with all the other resources that we have dedicated to trying to restore peace into our city. And this is, I believe, this
It's
is
like Lenox.
this is the looting at Phipps Plaza when individuals were using some type of stone or rock or some type of object and repeatedly kept throwing it at the window over and over and over again until they were able to breach those windows and went inside and began to start looting. The Target in Buckhead also suffering damage to its facility. It has been a disturbing night. The violence has not been squashed yet. For the residents who live in Atlanta and Buckhead, clearly concerned about the safety and will this be able to get under control? And then tomorrow, will there be concerns that there'll be another uprising? This has been, at least the sound that we got from reporters, from some of the individuals, they could have just been talking hotheads, but we certainly heard them say that if they got no justice today, whatever they thought the justice that they were looking for, they were coming back to riot tomorrow.
And I think the justice that they're looking for are more arrests in Minnesota. Now that that other video has been released that shows the other two police officers helping in the pinning down of George Floyd, and a fourth officer standing by the truck not doing anything to try to help Mr. Floyd, they want all four of those officers charged. And as of Friday, yesterday, only one of them has been. And so we will see whether the U.S. Attorney, whether prosecutors in Minnesota file any additional charges against any of those other police officers. We should note that all four of them have been fired. None of them are police officers anymore. But in order for there to be justice, according to a lot of the people we heard from tonight, on Friday night, they want to see all four of them arrested. And I can't help, Sean, but think of the words of Reverend Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the credibility that she brings to this issue. And I can't imagine that some of these young men and women who may have been out there angry, causing chaos tonight, if they were to just take a minute or two and listen to what Reverend King was saying when she talked about the fact that she's been there. She knows what it is to be angry. She knows what it is to lose a loved one to senseless gun violence. She gets it, but that the only path forward, the only path towards real change and real justice is one that follows nonviolence. And that is a message that you just have to hope will resonate.
It's almost like a two-edged sword for those individuals who have also walked the path like Bernice King and have repeatedly experienced, in their experience, as they put it, racist, unfair, unjust, unequal treatment repeatedly over and over and over again. And to see these images of this police officer, which has come out, that he and Mr. Floyd worked together on a side gig at a club outside of the 3rd Precinct that was torched and caught on fire. That's not far from where George Floyd was captured by police and handcuffed, and then the knee was into his neck. So there are layers to this story that if you've never ever experienced inequality with a public official, an officer that's entrusted to serve and protect, it's hard for you to understand why these protesters have been so angry, so frustrated, and as we've seen tonight in Atlanta, violent. There is no excuse for it. The mayor says a protest has purpose. She says the purpose is lost the minute that those buildings were torched, the minute that those cars were destroyed, and the minute that property was looted. The message, no matter how good and how wonderful it was at the start of this protest, and even the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, and the mayor, Mayor Bottoms, they both tweeted out earlier today, you have the right to protest. We honor that.
They're in support of the protesters.
In support of it. Just keep it peaceful. And the mayor in tears, heartbroken by the damage that we have seen to Atlanta and to Buckhead. That once the sun rises, we'll get a scope of just how far-fetched and how far-reaching the damage has been. But from what we've seen tonight with our reporters that have been in the field, it is extensive. Let's listen to this sound from Mayor Bottoms.
One of whom is 18 years old. And when I saw the murder of George Floyd, I hurt like a mother would hurt. And on yesterday, when I heard there were rumors about violent protests in Atlanta, I did what a mother would do. I called my son and I said, "Where are you?" I said, "I cannot protect you, and black boys shouldn't be out today. So you're not going to out-concern me and out-care about where we are in America." I wear this each and every day, and I pray over my children each and every day. So what I see happening on the streets of Atlanta is not Atlanta. This is not a protest. This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos. A protest has purpose. When Dr. King was assassinated, we didn't do this to our city. So if you love this city that has had a legacy of black mayors and black police chiefs and people who care about this city, where more than 50% of the business owners in Metro Atlanta are minority business owners. If you care about this city, then go home and pray that somebody like Reverend Beasley will come and talk to you and give you some instructions on what a protest should look like and how you effectuate change in America. This police chief made a video on yesterday, pull it up on YouTube, where she said she was appalled to watch the murder of George Floyd. This woman did that. You're not honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. You're not protesting anything running out with brown liquor in your hands, breaking windows in this city. T.I. and Killer Mike own half the West Side. So when you burn down this city, you're burning down our community. If you want change in America, go and register to vote. Show up at the polls on June 9th. Do it in November. That is the change we need in this country. You are disgracing our city. You are disgracing the life of George Floyd and every other person who has been killed in this country. We are better than this. We're better than this as a city. We are better than this as a country. Go home. Go home. In the same way I couldn't protect my son on yesterday, I cannot protect you out in those streets. You're throwing knives at our police officers. You are burning cars. You have defaced the CNN building. Ted Turner started CNN in Atlanta 40 years ago because he believed in who we are as a city. There was a black reporter who was arrested on camera this morning who works for CNN. They are telling our stories, and you are disgracing their building. This is not the legacy of civil rights in America. This is chaos, and we're buying into it. This won't change anything. We're no longer talking about the murder of an innocent man. We're talking about how you're burning police cars on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. Go home.
She meant every word that she said. And it is a message that went unheard by those looters in Georgia, in Atlanta. It has been disturbing to watch. It has been painful. This is our city. And as Killer Mike said, when we destroy our own city, what else do we have? This has been something that has extended for multiple hours. It is now 1:44 in the morning, and police have yet to contain fully the looters and the remnant of those violent protesters that were left over, that the police that used tear gas, and they had officers in full riot gear lined up, line by linked together to just push them peacefully out of Atlanta, out of downtown Atlanta, encouraging them, just go home. We had reporters stop and talk to those looters and say, the mayor, T.I., Killer Mike, is telling you, imploring you, go home. And astonishingly, we heard some of those individuals say on camera, I'm not going home, I'm not done, and I'm not leaving. And the result has been pockets of violence that has included cars being burnt up, buildings with their windows being burst out with huge slabs of concrete and rocks and stone and bricks. Clearly, none of this loose debris or these objects are lying or on the ground in downtown Atlanta outside of the CNN facility or also outside of Centennial Park. Those items had to have been hauled in. There was intentional premeditation by some individuals to create this chaos that has angered so many of us because our city is in turmoil. This is a black eye, a huge stain on the city of Atlanta, as police at this hour at 1:46 in the morning are still trying to contain pockets of violence that is happening in our city. The governor of Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp, has put Fulton County under a state of emergency. There are 500 National Guardsmen that are in Georgia that are being dispatched to help restore peace to the city of Atlanta and Buckhead. We just learned from the Associated Press that the Pentagon, which takes a rare step of putting military police on alert, there are similar situations that are happening around the country. The military police are on alert for Minneapolis, which is having another day of uprising. The soldiers from Fort Bragg in North Carolina and Fort Dunn in New York, they have been ordered to be ready to deploy within 4 hours to Minneapolis if they are called. In our government, with both Democrat Mayor Keisha Lance Bottom and Republican Governor Brian Kemp, they have been working together in tandem to restore peace and security in our city. Atlanta police have shown incredible restraint. We have seen protesters throw bottles at them, yell at them, disrespect them, shoot BB guns at them, and they did not retaliate. Instead, 3 of the Atlanta police officers are currently getting treatment for their injuries because of tonight's protests.
I'm reading through the governor's order, his state of emergency order that authorized the Georgia National Guard to help out with law enforcement. And it's just interesting to take a look at this and to read some of the language, and I'll read it to you. It says that pursuant to Code Section 38-2-307, the Georgia Department of Defense troops called to respond to this state of emergency shall have the same powers of arrest and apprehension as do law enforcement officers, to be exercised with caution and only if the circumstances demand the exercise of such powers to protect the safety of persons or property. So you really get a sense of just how seriously the governor takes this. You could tell by listening and watching Mayor Bottoms how seriously she takes this. And to hear, to know, as we all do, that we sit here in Atlanta, in the heart of the South, in the cradle of the civil rights movement, really the birth of the nonviolent movement here. And to see the violence that was carried out and continues to be carried out tonight, for the purpose of change, I think that the irony there is lost on no one, that such violence would fall on a city that really has made a reputation as being one of nonviolent. To know that these protesters took to the streets, some of them to march in the tradition of Martin Luther King Jr., to march in the tradition of John Lewis, in the tradition of Andrew Young, to march peacefully to make a point, only to have some other younger protesters come, maybe from surrounding areas, maybe from here in Atlanta, and disrupt that peaceful protest and turn it into something ugly, and turn it into something that would completely wipe out the entire message that those peaceful protesters were trying to convey. A message that really had universal support. There was no one that could watch the video out of Minneapolis and think that was anything but a heinous murder that we saw captured on video. And so you have people that are sympathetic to the cause, sympathetic to the need for reform, sympathetic to the idea that these injustices, as they happen over and over and over again, that something must be done to break that cycle of violence. But yet, people are not going to be able to get on board and be sympathetic when it comes to the tactics that we saw employed tonight. And we heard it from Mayor Bottoms, and we heard it from Killer Mike, and we heard it from Bernice King. You're stepping on your message. You want to get the point across that reform and change is needed, you're going to find a lot of people who agree with you. But if you go about trying to convey that message through means involving lighting police cars on fire, firing a bullet into a police vehicle at an officer, that is just not something that you're going to be able to get people to rally behind. And so that is really the upsetting part of this, because the cause is just. The reasons for the march and the protests were absolutely made absolute sense to so many people. But then they see the violence play out on the streets of Atlanta, the streets of Minnesota, on the streets of Washington, D.C., of Brooklyn, New York tonight, Columbus, Ohio. People can't understand that. People don't know where that comes from. Perhaps people who have grown up under the oppression of law enforcement that has treated them like second-class citizens. Yes, I'm sure there are some sympathetic ears there, the understanding that people can only take so much before all of a sudden they're going to reach their tipping point. But for everybody else, for the people like me, for white people who are sympathetic to the cause, it's very, very difficult to see, to watch and to feel supportive of protesters who are going to go out and cause such chaos and such mayhem. And we should state, and I should state, that those people who were doing this tonight, they were not just black, they were white as well, they were brown, they were Latino, I'm sure. You saw people of all different colors taking part in these protests and carrying out these acts of violence and destruction. But this is really just a tragic night, and it will go down in the history books. I'm sure kids will be learning about this. The riots in Atlanta on the night of May the 29th, 2020. Such a difficult year, Sean. Such a difficult year already, and now we have this just compounding all the challenges that we're already facing.
Well, there's an old adage that says, before the sun rises, it's always the darkest point of the day. We're hoping that all of this turmoil and uprising and the very difficult year of 2020, we're only in the month of May, and it has been incredibly challenging to people on many fronts, economically, with their health because of COVID-19, and now this tragedy with the riots taking a violent turn, this protest taking a violent turn in Atlanta. Bernice King, who we had just heard from, she has been very active on Twitter tonight, just posting that now she is calling on white faith leaders to step up and help others understand that don't just lament rioting, but also lament racism and become anti-racist. She is challenging the leaders of churches that are white to step up and help get this message out. We also were talking about, we talked about this press conference where we've heard from Killer Mike, we've heard from Mayor Bottoms, we've heard from Bernice King. Now let's listen to T.I. T.I., the rapper, also movie star, also committed to living in Manhattan. I mean, excuse me, not Manhattan, but Atlanta. And Mayor Bottoms made a very poignant point that she says Killer Mike and T.I. own a lot of the West Side. They're business owners. And when you destroy Atlanta, you're destroying the livelihoods of the people that they employ. And T.I., he was used language that sort of made, he said Atlanta is like Wakanda to him. If you've ever seen the movie Black Panther, Wakanda was reflective of Black excellence. And let's listen to his comments and how he says, Wakanda, we have to protect it.
I've already said what I had to say. Atlanta is the place where people like me, Killer Mike, other artists, creatives, other people who come from our culture, and other people who rise up out of the wreckage of the struggle that we all experience just by being born a certain color in this country. But Atlanta is a place where we can set an example of prosperity, and we've done that for generations. People like Dr. King, Maynard Jackson, Ambassador Young have paved the way for us. And when everything else goes away, when you don't get treated right in New York, when you don't get treated right in LA, when you can't get treated right in Detroit, when you don't get treated right in St. Louis, when you don't get treated right in Alabama, Atlanta has been here for us. This city don't deserve it. However, I understand that a lot of others do. But we can't do this here. This is Wakanda. It's sacred. It must be protected.
Short comments, but spoken from a man who millennials certainly relate to, and many of them were amongst the crowd, the protesters tonight. And he sent a message along with the mayor, along with Bernice King, to go home. It is now 1:56. We're 4 minutes away from 2 o'clock in the morning, and the message is still not clear. They have not gone home. There are pockets of violence still happening at this hour. We have been perusing Twitter and scouring for information from just viewers who are posting video on Twitter and what they're seeing. We're now hearing that there may be a possible fire at a mid-sized concert hall located in downtown Atlanta. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's called the Tabernacle. It's reportedly on fire, or perhaps the fire department is getting close to eliminating that blaze. But it is on fire. It is an active scene near where the Tabernacle is located in Atlanta. It's right off of Lucky Street. That's an area that we've seen a lot of activity tonight. And apparently other buildings along Lucky Street have suffered at least some damage to the buildings, and some of them have been looted. Not only is the problem in Atlanta, they have, despite being able to disperse much of that crowd that was at the thousands to small pockets, those small pockets are creating a lot of chaos still tonight for these officers who are responding in force. Buckhead also now becoming a second location where protesters have started to create problems there. This whole situation has forced Governor Brian Kemp to place Fulton County under a state of emergency. 500 National Guardsmen are now being dispatched to help these police officers restore peace and safety back into our city. Buckhead has several trouble spots that we've been monitoring for the last 2 hours or so. It includes Phipps Plaza. Phipps Plaza had a small contingent of protesters that arrived there with bricks in hand and some type of hard objects, began to throw it at the windows over and over again. They were able to breach it, and looting has happened in Phipps Plaza. There has also been perimeter and officers have been dispatched around Lenox Square. We haven't heard of any breach of Lenox Square, but the businesses that surround it have suffered a tremendous amount of damage from looters. It includes a hotel. There is a cell phone company there that had been raided and looted, and also a jewelry store that suffered significant damage as well. Jamie Kennedy is on the ground, and his vehicle, our reporter's vehicle, has also suffered significant damage. We have the police department, the fire department of Buckhead has, or at least Atlanta Fire, has requested the assistance of Johns Creek and Cobb County to assist putting out fires in Buckhead. There was a very popular restaurant, steakhouse there that suffered some significant damage. It was caught on fire. And here in Atlanta, there are still pockets of fire, still pockets of unrest. We are monitoring both Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and Atlanta Police Chief Shields, their Twitter feeds, to see if there is any kind of update. We are seeing from the Atlanta Police Department that they have verified that there have been 3 police officers that have been injured responding to these protests. And the Atlanta police have shown an incredible amount of restraint.
They really have. And Governor Kemp just tweeting out within the last minute, many thanks to the law enforcement officers and first responders working hard to ensure public safety and to restore peace in Atlanta as he works from the command center there. Governor Kemp still working at this late hour. We're going to Yasmin?
Yasmina.
Yasmina. Yasmina, who's up at Phipps Plaza. This is Yasmina Alston, one of the sort of fanciest malls in all of America tonight. Describe the scene for us right now. Well,
we're having some audio issues. We'll try to regroup with Yasmina.
But we did see some video, and it's been posted online. And
can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, there
go
you
ahead,
go.
Yasmina.
You guys got me?
Go ahead,
Yes.
Yasmina.
Okay, so just to give you guys an idea again of where we are, Lenox Mall is over here to my left. You can see there's a really large police presence. You see Atlanta police. It looks like I see South Fulton police over here as well. Now, if you look over here to my right, this is where Phipps Plaza is. Atlanta police have already told us that earlier tonight there were shots fired near Phipps Plaza, and there was also looting at Phipps Plaza as well as at the Target, which is not far from here. You can see there's a lot of traffic and a lot of commotion still going on out here. Police do have part of Peachtree Street blocked off. We had sort of a difficult time getting over to this area just because of all the road closures that we encountered once we got up to Buckhead. But you can see there's still a lot of traffic from folks that are being directed away from Phipps Plaza and away from Lenox Mall. You still see some groups that are walking on foot who are still being loud, and they're also walking away from this area as well. So still a very active scene out here. Again, police seem to have most everything under control in this area, but we'll of course keep you updated. Back to you guys.
Yes, I mean, before we let you go, I saw one of the protesters kind of make some movement behind you. Are you within reach to talk to some of them? Ask them, why are they still out at 2 o'clock in the morning? What are they hoping to accomplish? Do they consider that they're protesting for George Floyd, or now is it just to be out because they want to see what's going on?
Well, Sean, right now we're not able to talk to any of them. We actually just had police come over to this area and tell everyone to keep walking. You can see officers are standing over here. You can see Phipps Plaza is right over there, and then we've got some folks across the street. We'll try to get to some of them and ask them those questions for you.
Okay, perfect. Yasmina, thank you. We'll let you regroup, get over there and talk to some of them. Let's go back to the video that really started when things really started to get unruly. This is outside of CNN's headquarters, and here you see looters taking huge slabs of concrete and rocks and stones and using their feet to breach this window. And eventually they were able to break through and broke those windows. But we also CNN has the privilege of having a police department in their basement, and I sincerely believe, just from my vantage point, from what I saw, that the reason why CNN was successful in keeping those individuals from looting their facility and their offices is that they had armed gunmen. The armed gunmen pulled their weapons out and the looters and the protesters backed off. But everything around CNN, all those businesses that were around them have suffered some significant damage.
Yep, and these are businesses that have already been suffering as a result of the pandemic. Even as Governor Kemp has moved Georgia really to the front of the line in terms of reopening compared to other states around the country, it is still very slow going for businesses here in Atlanta. As we take a look at these live pictures from Centennial Olympic Park, excuse me. It's a little after 2 a.m. and you can see some of the destruction that was caused by these looters who were out tonight, these vandals who destroyed that bus stop. You can see there, though, the riot police are still there. They are still, as we take a look at these pictures here, they are ready in the event that anything flares up again. But hopefully that will not be the case. I'm sorry, did I?
They deployed an incredible restraint, but also many resources to try to disperse the crowds. We have seen the police department, Atlanta's police department, used tear gas. They used the police officers that are fully dressed in riot gear to push the crowd through. They have been very patient and again showed incredible restraint despite protesters shooting at them with BB guns and throwing water bottles at them and basically screaming. They never retaliated. But the question is, at what point, what is the tipping point? It's 2:05 in the morning. At what point is enough? And for these few that are out there, because it's not a lot of people. This is now dwindled down to hundreds. It is no longer crowds of thousands. This is crowds of hundreds. And here it looks like it may be just a handful of people, but creating trouble, won't go home. You cannot possibly be trying to protest George Floyd's death at 2 o'clock in the morning when you don't have anyone peaceful out there with you. It's nothing but chaos and destruction out there. At what point is it the tipping point for Atlanta Police Department to say enough is enough, go home, or we're arresting you? We saw with Police Chief Erica Shields, she said earlier in the day, she was not going to make this into where she was going to be arresting a lot of people. She has maintained and been true to her word. From our vantage point, we have seen very few people, in consideration to the thousands of people that were in the crowd, have been arrested. There have been very few, at least percentage-wise. But there are still a troubling amount of people on the streets when the police have made it very clear, go home, and they're not. Instead, they're creating pockets of problems, and the most recent one that we are monitoring now is what is happening at a popular club in Atlanta called the Tabernacle. It's located off of Lucky Street in Northwest.
Not far from where this camera is located right now.
Exactly. And there are reports that the Tabernacle, which is a mid-sized concert hall located in downtown Atlanta, has had some type of breach and a fire. Atlanta Fire is now trying to extinguish those flames. But when do you make these people go home? They're not out here to try to be safe. There is questions that will come to the police chief tomorrow, I'm sure, about what is the philosophy. What approach did you take? Did you do all that you possibly could to prevent the damage that we have seen here in Atlanta and now in Buckhead? Yasmina Alston, she is back on location. We asked her to try to grab some of those protesters who are out at 2:08 in the morning to see if they'll talk to us about why are they still out, why won't they go home, and what do they hope to accomplish this early in the morning. Hey, Yasmina.
Hey, Sean, so we actually weren't able to ask any of those people walking by why they were still out here. Police have been asking everyone to keep walking and to get away from Phipps Plaza. Now, to give you an idea of where we are, again to my left, Lenox Mall over here, huge police presence still. You can hear the sirens. I mean, there's a lot of movement going this way. Then if you look to my right, you can see police over here and a lot of traffic moving this way, away from the Phipps Plaza area. Atlanta police did tell us that earlier there were shots fired near Phipps Plaza, and there was also looting at Phipps Plaza as well as a Target not far from here. So at this point, police are trying to get everyone away. You can see they're coming over here to stop traffic for a second while a police officer leaves the area as well. So they're trying to clear everyone out right now. Sean?
It is far from over. I'm not sure if you've been able to talk to any of the police officers out there. Do they have any idea when this could possibly be contained? It seems like it is never ending.
Yeah, never ending. I mean, what a night for Atlanta, Sean. Just from what we've seen downtown and now here in the Buckhead area, this has just been an incredibly long night for Atlanta with a lot of destruction and just incredible images from what we've been seeing.
Well, Yasmina, you've done a fantastic job. Be safe, and hopefully you'll be able to get some of those protesters that are out at 2:09 in the morning. We'll let you go and try to regroup and see if you can get some success at accomplishing that. Let's go back to just some more images. This is at Lenox Road, off of Peachtree Road at Lenox Road, where not far from where Yasmina is, and it is still a very active and there's no word yet on when this is going to be contained. The governor, Governor Brian Kemp, has issued a state of emergency for Fulton County. He has deployed 500 National Guardsmen to come and assist our Atlanta Police Department, along with the other cooperating agencies that are now helping to try to restore peace and protect the property of many of these businesses that have been torched or looted or destroyed.
You know, I'd have to think that these police officers are going to be out all night, and you can see them directing traffic exactly where they want people to go, which is nowhere near Lenox Mall. They want to try to keep people moving away from Phipps and Lenox. There are residential neighborhoods that are right in that particular area, and so people might be trying to get home or at least just drive through those areas to get to wherever they need to go. But you have to imagine that the police presence that we're seeing right now at this intersection at Peachtree and Lenox, that they're going to be out there all night. There's really no need for the police to go anywhere else except just to stay where they are and to continue to try to keep the peace and keep any more hotspots from flaring up.
Well, just a reminder that we are not only monitoring what is happening here in Atlanta, but there is a similar scene in Minneapolis, in Dallas, Texas, in Los Angeles, in Ohio, in Denver, Colorado. And because of that, especially in Minneapolis, according to the Associated Press, the Pentagon has taken a rare step of putting military police on alert to head out to Minneapolis. We've learned that soldiers from Fort Bragg in North Carolina and Fort Dunn in New York have been ordered to be ready to deploy within 4 hours to Minneapolis. And just here in Atlanta, Governor Kemp has deployed 500 Georgia National Guardsmen to help bring and restore peace to our city. It's a story that is far from over. We're going to continue to monitor this. This is the perfect time to download the CBS 46 streaming app. It will bring all the latest developments to your cell phone.
We'll, of course, have complete coverage starting tomorrow morning here on CBS 46 and throughout the day and anytime online. Stay with us. Have a safe night. Good night.
Will you still be here? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
This is CBS 46 News at 7. Getting results.
We're no longer talking about the murder of an innocent man. We're talking about how you're burning police cars on the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. Go home.
Right now at 7, passionate words from a mother, mayor, and native Atlantan forced to watch her city burn. What began as a peaceful protest demanding justice for a black man who died after having a police officer's knee forced onto his neck turned into something much worse.
Cars reduced to ashes, businesses looted, police officers injured. This morning, the city of Atlanta is trying to climb out of a pit of despair. And it is a tough morning for anybody who lives or works in Atlanta. Good morning to you. I'm Gervier Dinza.
And I'm Karen Greer. A state of emergency now in effect for Fulton County. At least 500 National Guardsmen given the green light to come into the city. Their mission, protect what's left of downtown Atlanta and Buckhead.
Now, early this morning, Governor Kemp tweeted this photo of him meeting with members of the Georgia Department of Public Safety, one of the many steps toward restoring order in our city.
Team coverage this morning as we update you on what happened and what's next. We begin with CBS 46's Trayson Bragg live near Lenox Square Mall. Trayson.
That's right. Good morning. I'm actually right across the street from Lenox Square Mall in a shopping center called Across from Lenox. Look behind me. You see that? The AT&T store, boards all across the store. I can tell you windows, all of the windows were broken here. I can tell you that because when my photojournalist and I first arrived, we saw crews putting those boards up and all the products inside were taken out. That store was completely empty, but that's not all. I want to show you there's more damage here. Take a look at this. This is Dentist One Dental Care. Glass is broken. This is actually a pole. This is actually a handicap parking sign that somebody threw into the business to break the glass. Multiple glasses broken here. If you look inside, I'm going to ask you to take a closer look here. Look inside. You see that there are chairs, tables thrown over. It looks like somebody grabbed possibly a register. And look at the bottom. You see there is water on the floor. Alarms going off. I'll show you why. This is the Sleep Number store here. And look, there is at least one fire that was set inside this Sleep Number store. Look around you. There are products missing. All the shelves empty. Register has been taken here. And again, the smell is still strong following this fire, which actually continued out of the store. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Take a look at that mattress right there. That's where the fire ended, it looks like, here in this strip mall. And I also have to tell you, on our way here, we heard that there were calls for help at Anthrop Jewelry down the street. Once we arrived to the jewelry store, we found a security guard with a bulletproof vest on and an AR-15. We tried to get close, and he immediately stopped us, pointing that AR-15 at us. He obviously didn't know what was going on or who we were. And from APD tells us just up the street at the intersection of Peachtree Road and Lenox Road, someone fired shots at an officer. So we're going to continue to follow the destruction here, what happened following this protest, and we'll keep you up to date with everything that's going on here in Buckhead. Reporting live in Buckhead, I'm Trayson Bragg, CBS 46 News.
Now in the daylight, it really is just, it's mind-boggling, Trayson, as we look at those images and see what's happened in downtown Atlanta. It's an understatement to say it is a mess. Video taken about 2 o'clock this morning shows police trying to round up the last remaining protesters. CBS 46's Megan Packer is live on Marietta Street. She's outside the CNN Center where people smashed the windows and torched police cars. Megan, what are you seeing now that the sun's come up this morning?
Gabriel, the sun is up now. We're seeing more people come out to check out the damage, but we begin with a sign of peace. Quite literally, we are outside of the Omni Hotel. You've got Bill out here. He's with the construction company that works at the Omni. He's cleaning up all of the broken glass, and you can see it here. He's been working very hard on this. He says we could use this right now. He put it in this sign of peace. As you look up, you can see the smashed windows here at the Omni Hotel. This is right next to the CNN Center. This is just one portion of the damage that we are seeing here along Marietta Street. As we came out here, it was still dark this morning. The sun is up now. We are seeing debris in the roads. This is the neighborhood. These streets are where police cars and other vehicles burned last night. Take a look at these windows here at the Omni. Busted out, broken. This is a desk into the valet area at the Omni Hotel. Absolutely wrecked. Glass shattered everywhere. Furniture turned upside down, graffiti on the walls here. And again, this is just one stretch of this portion of Marietta Street. The CNN Center is further down. We will take you there in our next hour. We wanted to start our coverage here. Again, we are seeing people come out. They're riding their bikes. They're taking walks and morning runs. Some people coming out to take some pictures. But again, the sun is rising on this new day in the city of Atlanta. We are getting a better view of just what happened last night. But this gives you an idea of the cleanup ahead for many people here in downtown Atlanta. I'm Megan Packer, CBS 46 News.
Oh my gosh, Megan, people still so shocked to see the woman behind you, as you said, taking pictures of the damage of the rubbish. Thank you so much for that. Now, these violent protesters didn't limit their destruction to just the Omni Hotel. Several windows outside the College Football Hall of Fame shattered this morning. The gift shop looted. CBS 46's Barmel Lyons continuing our team coverage right now. Barmel, you know, people wondering if from all these ashes, Atlanta will rise again like a phoenix, because this is just so hard to watch. Good morning.
Good morning, Karen. And yes, hopefully Atlanta does rise again as a phoenix, but we are seeing the aftermath of a peaceful protest turned riot after last night. Right across the way is College Football Hall of Fame. You can see the National Guard lined up in front of it after glass was broken into, shattered, scattered across the sidewalk. I mean, overnight, it was a crazy experience. At the request of Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, Governor Kemp issued a state of emergency for Fulton County to activate as many as 500 National Guard troops, and that's why you're seeing them here. And this is unique, folks, because usually National Guard comes out for natural disasters, but they're here today for a man-made disaster. Now, check out the graffiti on the wall. Every riot is a rush right there, and they have a mass amount of graffiti over here. Chick-fil-A also being broken into, Omni Hotel. I want to take you over here real quickly. You can see some bystanders this morning as they're sort of walking past, checking out what's there. Now, there are ash remains from a car fire that took place right last night. Now, people putting those cars on fire. They not only put in a flame an Atlanta Police Department vehicle, but also people's cars on the side of the road. You can see the ash remains that are right here. Check it out, the soot that is left behind. You can see the tire tread here. I mean, it was a really intense scene. These cars, you know, exploding before people's eyes as they were caught on fire, enveloped in flames. You could see the smoke that was just rising into the sky last night. This is what's left behind. Everyone in Atlanta is hurt by this. And we not only throughout the night saw location here, but we saw it at Kroger, we saw it at Target. It's just mass destruction all across Atlanta. Back to you in the studio.
Ramel Lyons, thank you so much for that update. Now, as Atlanta burned, a woman forever attached to the civil rights movement of the 1960s shared why it was and is still so hurtful to hear people bend her father's words to justify their actions.
We're talking about the Reverend Bernice King. She, of course, the daughter of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and she did not mince words in her criticism of those people.
Riots are the language of the unheard. And the part we often miss when people use it is the part about the unheard. This is a time when we all have to listen. We have to listen to the cries that are coming out of the hearts and the souls of my young brothers and sisters and all of the others that are in the streets of America right now and in our city.
Reverend King echoed her father's comments that the only way to enact true and lasting change is through nonviolence. And Karen, I know that we heard yesterday evening also from a couple of other very prominent Atlanta natives, T.I., Killer Mike, saying the same thing.
Yes, I had a chance to call just a couple of people that were just shocked by this. One being Congressman John Lewis. He was in Washington but wanted to speak about this. This is hurting their heart. And also Ambassador Andrew Young. To see the streets look like this, to see Atlanta with people looting and just breaking windows. This isn't the Atlanta we know, Gravere.
It's not. It's not. This is painful.
The city too busy to hate last night was hating.
We'll have much more coming up throughout the morning.